Boys and girls, my name is Mrs. Wren, and I teach second grade at Loveland Elementary. Today I'm going to read to you the chapter From Pinball to Video. The first ever arcade game was called Bagatelle. Extremely popular during the 19th century, it was played on a cloth-covered oblong board. The object of the game was for players using a cue stick to shoot balls into 9 numbered scoring cups. Basically, it was sort of an oddball offshoot of billiards. In 1871, a man named Montague Redgrave greatly modified Bagatelle. Instead of a cue stick, a spring plunger was used to knock the ball into motion. He also added pins, which altered the ball's directions and bells, which sounded when a score was made. All in all, Redgrave's changes marked the true beginning of pinball. Amusement arcades first began to appear in the United States in the later half of the 19th century. Though games of skill or chance were to be found in arcades, they usually took a back seat to fortune-telling machines, strength-testing machines, and mechanical peep shows. Not until the 1920s did games, especially pinball games, become a common feature in American arcades. Whoopee, Billiards Guild, Little Whirlwind were all pinball games of the Roaring '20s. But the most successful was Baffle Ball, invented in 1927 by David Gottlieb. Onto a horizontal playing field, the player shot 7 steel balls, one at a time, at 4 circular scoring areas. A ball that landed at a cup, called the battle point, doubled the score of the entire table, provided it was not knocked off by subsequent balls. More than anything else, it was this point doubling feature that made Baffle Ball so popular. Within a year of its invention, 400 of the machines were being produced every day. Banging, knocking, jiggling. Players of the early machines did all these things to try to get a ball into a desired hole. They also smacked the bottom of the machine. That was the most popular technique of all. By doing this, a player could jar a ball out of one scoring hole into another. To put an end to this practice, a manufacturer named Harry Williams came up with the crude but effective idea. Nails with the points outward were hammered into the bottom of the machine. To say the least, anybody trying to slap the table underneath got a painful surprise. In 1931, Williams devised a gentler anti-cheating device. This device was called a stool pigeon. It consisted of a steel ball set atop a pedestal. If the machine was knocked around too much, the ball fell, immediately stopping play. Williams eventually came to be known as the father of modern pinball. The reason he turned pinball into an electric game? First, he added ordinary doorbells. Then came electric buzzers, flashing lights, and an automatic scoreboard. And then Williams added another feature, one that made pinball illegal. The new addition was an automatic payout device. For winning a number of games in a row, the player received a small handful of coins. Church groups and politicians complained that pinball had become a gambling game. Newspapers carried stories that linked pinball salesmen with organized crime. Because of these charges, many citizens picketed arcades. In 1939, Atlanta, Georgia became the first city to pass a law against pinball playing. The punishment was a $20 fine and a month in jail. In 1941, Fiora LaGuardia, up for re-election as the mayor of New York City, even went as far as to destroy pinball machines with a sledgehammer. Many other American cities soon jumped on the anti-pinball bandwagon. Most banned not only the payout version of the game, but pinball machines of any kind. Interestingly, it was another addition to the pinball machines that saved the game. In 1947, the Gottlieb Company made a machine with flippers, and the small arms near the bottom of the board, controlled by bottoms on the side of the machine. By using the flippers, a player could keep a ball and play indefinitely. Hoping to get their machines back into the arcades, pinball manufacturers took their case to federal court. With the payout device gone, they argued pinball was no longer a gambling game, and adding flippers had changed it into a game of skill. The court agreed, and pinball was back. Soon old games were being dusted off and set up for play, and at the same time, all sorts of new games were invented. In the early 1960s, a group of computer engineers in the United States began toying with the concept of combining pinball and video. In 1962, they created Space War, the first ever computerized video game. Because Space War's inventors were only interested in amusing themselves and not in marketing the product, the item never appeared in stores. In 1972, a man named Nolan Bushnell started the Atari Company to make and sell video games similar in design to Space War. The first product that the company came out with was called Pong, a tennis-like game. By today's standards, Pong was a very primitive and uninteresting version of real-life tennis. Still, it was a start and the beginning of the most exciting new product line in the recent history of the toy industry. Soon, all sorts of new games were being invented, most of them intended for home use rather than arcades. By 1975, 3 short years after the invention of Pong, the Atari Company alone was producing more than 100 games. By 1976, manufacturers had come out with games that could be played by 2 people at once, games with multi-level playing fields, and more important, games with a machine that had true video game features. Called the Spirit of 76, this game used electronic blips and flashes instead of steel balls. From billiards to pinball to video, at first glance, these 3 games seem so different from each other, but they're not. In numerous and often surprising ways, their histories are intertwined. Then there's some bullet points. Despite the competition from video games, pinball machines are as popular today as ever. Arcade owners consider them an indispensable attraction. A new pinball machine costs over $1,000. That's not a lot of money when you consider that the profit from a machine is about $10,000 to $15,000 a year. More than 60% of all pinball machines manufactured in the United States are exported to other countries. The Camp Flipper, a pinball machine invented in Germany, is played by 4 players simultaneously. By 1984, Atari was facing stiff competition from Nintendo, a Japanese company. Sophisticated video games depend on microprocessors. First introduced in 1976, a microprocessor is a tiny computer chip that contains and processes all of the needed information to play the game. By 2014, worldwide sales for video games were $1.6 trillion.